Last year, the Alabama newspaper columnist John Archibald wrote a wonderful column about why you shouldn't idealize Southern mothers. One of his points was that you deny Southern mothers their uniqueness if you always put them up on a pedestal or treat their lives as something out of a country music song. I must admit that if I were going to idealize any Southern mother, it would be Miss Grace. But she was unique, so I'll give a few examples. I met Miss Grace more than 45 years ago after Judy had moved to New York and she came to the city to visit. Miss Grace and Judy and I went to lunch at a restaurant, and the talk turned to a trend that was gaining momentum, which was feminism, or as it was known then, women's lib. One of the ideas that was in the air then was fairness to working women, which Judy would later do so much to advance as the editor-in-chief of Working Mother. Other popular ideas involve social customs, such as whether women should call men for dates. The subject came up at lunch, and when Miss Grace heard about it, she looked across the table and said, "If any of my daughters ever called a man, I would chop their fingers off." I know for a fact that at least one of her daughters has disregarded that warning and still has all her fingers, so I suspect that, like most of us, Miss Grace mellowed a little as she got older. I tell you this because it exemplifies one of the qualities I found so appealing about her. She was warm and gracious, but she spoke her mind. One of the big challenges of moving to the South from the North is that Southerners, especially Southern women, often seem to be speaking in code. You go to your neighbors' houses for lunch, and it's like trying to break the Enigma code. With Miss Grace, you knew where you stood, and I found that tremendously refreshing. Her daughters also had strong opinions that, as in any family, could differ from their mothers. I'm guessing, for example, that Judy and Walter don't spend as much time watching Fox News as Miss Grace did. One of Miss Grace's greatest achievements was that she kept the family together despite those differences. We all know families with members who can't sit next to each other at Thanksgiving over differences about things like Fox News or MSNBC. Ms. Grace didn't let those differences tear the family apart, and I know that many people would like to know how she did it. Perhaps part of her secret was that she truly enjoyed people and had a gift for making them feel valued. I've spoken to Miss Grace in many settings, including at both of Judy's weddings. But I've also run into her at Greer's, our grocery store, where she may have been buying bananas for her excellent banana pudding. Whenever I saw her, she always stopped to talk to me, asked me about my life, and invited me to visit. I have friends my own age who don't do that, nor do I always do it because we have so much else on our plate. Miss Grace also had a gift for understanding other people's needs. When I moved to town, many people took me on great tours of Fairhope and pointed out many of its beautiful sights, like the pier and the beaches and the live oaks. I went on a tour with Ms. Grace, and she pointed out the kudzu. Many of you may be thinking, why on earth would you point out kudzu? It's a weed, and it's a plague on our town. In fact, when you're an out-of-towner, that is exactly the kind of thing you do need to have pointed out, because there are cascades of it all over town and nobody thinks to mention it. Since then, Ms. Grace's legacy has lived on in me when I point out the kudzu every time I take a Yankee on a tour of our town. Once I did this when I was showing a visitor from New York around, a best-selling author, and it happened that the driver of the car was Mark Johnson, a local author who used to be a policeman. Mark jumped in and said, "And boy, do the police hate kudzu." He explained that besides providing cover for snakes, Kudzu can grow over holes, and when the police are chasing a suspect, they can fall into a hole or ditch. The visiting best-selling author was fascinated, and we had a lively conversation we would never have had without Miss Grace. She was the perfect embodiment of a 4-line poem by the Danish poet Pete Hein. The well you invite us to drink of is one that no drop may be bought of. You think of what all of us think of, but nobody else could have thought of. It may be a bit intimidating to think of how you can honor Miss Grace's legacy, because her legacy includes daughters who are always kind, thoughtful, well-spoken, and beautifully dressed and groomed. You may look at them and think, Ms. Grace just set the bar too high for the rest of us with those girls. So I'll end by suggesting 2 ways to honor her legacy besides trying to compete in the Beautiful Daughters sweepstakes. One way you can do it is just to make time for people, as she did at the grocery store and elsewhere. But the most important thing you can do if you'd like to honor Ms. Grace's legacy is simply this. When your Yankee friends come to town, always point out the kudzu.